Greenfield, the Wine Whisperer. Live, is Jerry live on the headset?
Everybody hear me okay? Great, thank you. Thank you for coming. PJ, that was an incredible introduction. The only time I've ever been introduced better than that was I was doing a wine event one night and the MC didn't show up. I had to introduce myself. But that was amazing. That was amazing. All right, we get started today. I have a couple of things that I'd like to bring to you, a little more perspective about wine. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 5S approach, which you obviously have learned from the book that's available to you, but I want to go a little more deeply into that. And I want to talk about corks versus screw caps, because I know we get a lot of questions about that, and it's a concern for a lot of you people. Before I start, just one quick announcement. Has several people come up to me this morning and ask if they could still get a copy of my book. We do have Secrets of the Wine Whisperer available on the back table in the entryway. If you'd like one, I'll be here for the rest of the afternoon. Be happy to sign it personally for you. So let's get started. What is wine? Why is it that wine is such a special thing? What is it? Where does the romance come from? Where does the special thing come from? People could drink anything they wanted. We could drink milk, we could drink water, we could drink grape juice, root beer. But wine has a mystique and a charm and a significance to it that no other beverage has. And there I am. Let's see. Rob, I'm thinking this is, there we go. Wine is an ancient beverage. Obviously, it was discovered by accident. Grapevines grow up trees; they grow wild. So back in ancient Egypt, and even before that, thousands of years ago, somebody picked a bunch of grapes. They put them in a bowl. Somehow or other, they got crushed. The yeast on the skins worked on the juice, and they wound up with something that made them happy. And the thing is, when you stop to think about it, look, 4,000 years ago, people lived lives that the best way to describe it, they were nasty, brutish, and short. And it was terrible back then. So number one, anything that you could drink that took that edge off a little bit and made you feel a little bit better, that the fact that you live in a hole in the ground was a good thing. And number two, the water would kill you. You go drink the water out of the stream where the animals are peeing, you die. You know, water wasn't safe to drink. Milk wasn't safe to drink if you knew how to get it out of the goat because it wasn't pasteurized. So wine was basically the only thing you could drink that would not, that wouldn't kill you. And when people want to illustrate the good life, when they want to show luxury, when they want to show charm and enjoyment and romance, what do they show you? They show you wine. This is an example. This is a shot of a restaurant in Paris called the Tour d'Argent. Tour d'Argent in French means the Tower of Silver, but argent in French also means money. So if you're going to eat at the Tour d'Argent, believe me, you better have a tower of money, because the most famous restaurant in Paris, and that's a shot of their wine cellar. It goes down under the street for hundreds of feet. There's wines in there from 100, 200, 300 years old that are just absolutely unbelievable. I just want to show you some examples. Rob, can you go ahead and do this for me? Yeah. I found this ad. I get this circular from Celebrity Cruise Lines. Celebrity Cruise Lines wants to show you how wonderful and elegant and enjoyable and terrific their cruises are. What do they show you? The wine collection, okay? Wine is a sacrament. It's a holy drink. To the Catholics, wine is a holy drink. To the Jews, we drink 4 glasses of it at the Passover Seder every year. And we make blessings over it. Even if it's not Passover, we make a blessing over it when we drink it. So it is a sacrament. It's a holy beverage, in addition to everything else about it that we like. I need to go back one. I think I'm pushing these things too fast. So basically, wine involves a 2-step process. First, you have to grow the grapes. and the farmer does that, then you have to make the wine, and the enologist or the winemaker does that. So when we talk about viticulture, we're talking about three things. We're talking about the vineyard, we're talking about where it is, and if you were in the Master Cellars dinner last night, you heard me talk about the fact that the best way to understand wine is the three G's: the grape, the ground, and the guy or the gal who makes it. So we have the vineyard. We have a thing called terroir, which is everything that has to do with where the grape is grown. It's the elevation, it's the soil, it's the climate, it's the fog that rolls in off the Pacific. It is all these things that influence the quality of the grape. And if you can make bad wine out of good grapes, but you can't make good wine out of bad grapes. So terroir, that's French word. French have a word for everything. And then we have appellations. Where is the wine from? Appellation is a legally designated name for a particular wine growing region. But this terroir thing is really important. You hear people talk about it. So let's say PJ and I, we have vineyards, and his is over here and mine's over here, and it's separated by a cart path that's maybe 6 feet wide. And I'm getting $5,000 a ton for my grapes, and PJ's only getting $2,000 a ton for his. Why? I'm 5 feet further up the hill. I get better drainage. I have a vein of limestone running under my vineyard, and the grapes are, the vines, the roots are picking up this minerality that he doesn't have. There's all kinds of little things that affect the quality of the wine. So the soil, the climate, the age of the vine. A lot of you, if you go looking for, especially for Zinfandel, you'll see on the label it'll say ancient vines, because these roots go down into the soil, dozens, 50, 60, 70 feet, as they age. And there's vines in California that are over 100 years old. They're still producing grapes. The further down those roots grow, the more nutrition and the more minerality and the more good stuff they bring up out of the soil. And you have the winemaker's decisions. When do you pick the grapes? What should the sugar content be? How ripe do you let them get? Am I going to crush them with whole clusters, or am I going to destem them first? Am I going to ferment it in oak? Am I going to ferment it in stainless steel? All of these many decisions affect what finally winds up in the bottle. And then you've got diseases. There are all kinds of things that affect vines. The wine louse, phylloxera. Phylloxera is a microscopic insect that attacks the roots of the vines. And this little thing, it's really big up there, but it is like literally microscopic. You can't see them. Wiped out the entire wine industry in Europe in the 1800s. And the only way that they could survive was by bringing in vines from America, because American vines are resistant to it. So almost all of the grapes grown in the world today come from American rootstock, because the phylloxera louse doesn't affect it. Then you got the glassy wing sharpshooter. There's a clever little name for this bug. It spreads a disease called Pierce's disease that kills the vines. So there's all kinds of things working against us when we try to make really good wine. Here's another one, noble rot. Now this happens to be a good thing. Noble rot attacks grapes, especially in places like Bordeaux in France, and this is where we make Sauterne from. Sauterne is one of the finest, most prized, most expensive sweet wines in the world. And it comes from grapes that look like that. I look at that and I say, you know, who was the first person who looked at that and said, you know what? I bet that's going to make great wine. It's like the first person who ever ate an oyster. You know, you think, why would you do that? But these are things that we deal with when we make wine. So the other problem we have, you only get one harvest per year. If you're growing corn, you get three. You're growing wheat, you get winter wheat, you get spring wheat. A winemaker has one chance every year to make a decent bottle of wine. So in the northern hemisphere, obviously September, October is when we harvest. In the southern hemisphere, February, March. So you only get one shot at it. Come on. Okay. The grapevine is an interesting plant, and it grows only in certain places of the world. We grow apples in Washington State. We grow oranges in Florida. We grow peaches in Georgia for a reason. We cut back the vine in the winter. We have bud break in the spring. The buds flower. The flowers turn into fruit. Well, we go through the vineyard with our little pruning hook, and we drop clusters. And we do that because if we have too much fruit on the vine, the juice gets diluted, and it doesn't make really good wine. So it's a heartbreaking thing. It's like killing your babies. You go through there and you drop those clusters on the ground so that you wind up with less fruit, but the less fruit you have, the more concentrated the juice is, and the better the wine is. And then we harvest. So, climate. Take a look at this river. This river is in a horseshoe. And you can see that there's vineyards on one side and vineyards on the other side. I guarantee you that the grapes that come from the vineyards on each side are going to be very, very different. One side gets 5 minutes more sun. The other side is a little bit cooler. Little bitty differences make very, very big differences in the quality of fruit that you get. So we talked about the concept of terroir, the climate, the soil, the elevation, the limestone underneath, the composition. All of these things are really important, and there are many, many different kinds of climates that affect what finally winds up in the bottle. Then we harvest, and when we harvest according to what's called Brix. Brix is a measure of sugar content. And you go through the vineyard with this little box. It's got batteries in it. It's got a little LED readout, and it's got little numbers on it. And you take a drop of juice, pour it on there, and it tells you that you're 23, 24, 25 Brix. And then you have people sitting there, and as the grapes come in from the vineyard, you sort them by hand if you're making really high-quality wine. So we have sorting, then we crush the grapes. Then we put them in a vat, in some sort of vat. We put them in oak, we put them in stainless steel, we put them in glass, we put them in something to let the fermentation take place. Fermentation, yeast eats sugar and spits out alcohol. Sounds very simple, but I think, yeah, I'd take a round of applause for that too, you know. Think about it. You go to a store, you bring home a bunch of grapes, that white film on the skins of the grapes, that's yeast. Why does yeast grow on grapes? And why does it, when it crushed, does it ferment and make wine? Because God wants us to be happy. That's why. Yeah. Benjamin Franklin said that. I'm sorry, it's not original with me. That's a picture of a destemmer. Some winemakers will crush whole clusters. Some winemakers will put it through a destemmer and take the stems off. There's different reasons for doing it both ways. So we have all different kinds of fermentation, all different kinds of ways that we get the juice to become wine and to turn into the kind of product we want. These terms, we don't really have to know these right now, but someday, you may run into them. If you want to know what any of them mean, write to me. So fermentation. Here I am in a friend's vineyard. And we're punching down the cap. When you crush the grapes, the skins rise to the top, the juice goes to the bottom. You want to get flavor out of the skins. You have a tool. It's a long rod with a flat plate on the bottom. You punch the skins down back into the juice to get more extraction. Or you can take the juice and pump it up over so that it goes back through. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Then we blend it. A lot of times you'll have straight Cabernet Sauvignon, you'll have straight Merlot, but a lot of the wines that we drink are blended. The Bordeaux blend, for example, are very famous wines from Bordeaux. Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, a couple of other red grapes. There are reasons for it. Some of them are traditional. Some of it because this grape adds color, this grape adds perfume, this grape adds body, this grape adds tannins. There's all different reasons why we blend. I saw some people emailed me with some wines that they'd gotten, and it says white wine. Okay, it's a blend. They don't have to tell you what's in the bottle, but maybe we know, maybe we don't. So there's all different kinds of blends that are very traditional. In Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the Southern Rhone, for example, they are allowed to blend up to 13 different grapes in their wine. Not everybody uses all 13, of course, but you could if you wanted to. 8 of them are red and 5 of them are white. You still wind up with red wine. So there are traditions. There are traditions for that. So then you have the barrel. Barrels are made over flames. So when the barrels when staves are bent, the inside gets toasted. The sugars in the wood caramelize. They add flavors to the wine: toffee, vanilla, cola, coffee, chocolate, flavors like that. That's where those flavors come from. Clarification. This is a friend of ours has a winery in the Rhone, and this they did this barrel with a plexiglass slide. That's what the wine looks like in the barrel before it's clarified. And that's basically what wine is. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the 5S approach. We get the next one up, because this is something that you can use in your tastings, and you can use in your in the events that you have to help people understand wine and appreciate it a little bit more. Last night at the Master Cellars dinner, we talked about the idea that enjoying wine means you like it, but appreciating wine means knowing why you like it. What are the flavors in there? Sorry? We have a problem with this? No? It's all right. Okay, good. So there are, we have the 5S approach, and if you've read the book in your back office, you know it's see, swirl, sniff, sip, and swallow. And I just want to go through these with you very, very briefly, just to kind of drive it home and maybe give you a little bit more information about how this works and why we do it this way. When you're looking at the wine, there's certain things you can tell about it. First of all, you can tell whether it's red or white. You know, that's always a good thing to know. You can tell that if it's really clear. If you can see through it, you know it's going to be fairly light-bodied. If you can't see through it, if it's inky black or really dark, you know it's going to be a more full-bodied wine. You can tell the age of a wine by looking at it. You can tell that, for example, is that... oh, okay.
Your 5S approach, Jerry.
Sorry?
5S approach, Jerry.
Okay. Flavor components of wine. These are some things that we can tell by looking and by sipping and by sniffing. So, fruit. Wine has fruit flavors. It has floral flavors and aromas. Red wines, red flowers. White wines, white flowers. Jasmine, honeysuckle, gardenia, things like that. Spice, red wines sometimes have flavors of cinnamon or nutmeg or baking spices or things like that. Vegetal, flavors like mushroom or a green pepper, bell pepper, things like that. Oak and oil, there's a lot of things that oak does to wine. I do a 2-hour class on what oak does to wine. Oil, sometimes wines, especially wines from Europe, have a kind of a, I'd call it like a petroleum sort of thing. Sounds terrible. Why do I want to drink petroleum? You know, it's gasoline. But in wine, a lot of these flavors actually work. So, yeah. So we're going to see it. We can tell, we may be able to tell the varietal. If it's a really light red wine, maybe it's a Pinot Noir. If it's a dark red wine, maybe it's a Cabernet or a Syrah. We can tell the condition of the wine. We can tell age. Red wines lose color as they age. White wines gain color as they age. Red wines fade, they become like brick. White wines get darker and golden and brown. So we can tell translucent. So if we can see through it, we know it's going to be light-bodied. If we can't see through it, we know it's going to be a little heavier-bodied. So we're looking, viscosity, legs. Everybody, you all know about legs? You know, people look at, look at the legs on this baby. This wine's got legs. Legs are not an indication of quality. Legs are a result of the fact that alcohol evaporates faster than water does. And all legs will do is tell you basically something about the alcohol content of the wine. We swirl. We swirl to aerate the wine. We swirl to release the flavor components, the aromas, and in red wines it helps to break down the tannin. Tannin is that substance that gives you that sort of dry feeling. It's a mouthfeel. Like W.C. Fields said, feels like the Russian army marched through my mouth in stocking feet, you know? And that's what tannin does. But swirling it and decanting wine helps to break down the tannins. We smell. Smell is the most important sense. Your sense of taste is 80% your sense of smell. And what we want to try to do is to build sense memory. When you smell something, smell goes right to your hindbrain, right to the back. So you can tell right away what's the first thing you smell. Do you smell do you smell grapefruit in a Sauvignon Blanc? Do you smell black plum? Do you smell cherry? Do you smell red cherry? Do you smell black cherry? All of these things are part of the understanding and the appreciation of wine. So what should we smell? Flavor categories, primary aromas, various scents of the grape, plum, cherry in red grapes, citrus, melon, peach, pear, apple in white wines. Sometimes we find faults and flaws. Old world wines may get a little earthy, may get a little funky kinds of flavors. New world wines, maybe just the flavors fade a little bit. But there are a lot of times when wines are flawed. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next presentation. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We taste. When last night in the Master Cellars dinner, said, all right, we're going to swirl it. We're going to put our nose in the glass, close our eyes, take a couple of short sniffs like a puppy, because it keeps your olfactory glands from getting tired out. It's better than taking one long snort. You really don't want to do that. So we're going to taste. We sip the wine, and we're going to chew it around in our mouths a little bit, because our tongues taste flavors in 4 different places. There's 4 flavors: sweet, salt, sour, and bitter. And our tongues taste these flavors in 4 different places. So you want to get that wine in your mouth. You want to chew it around a little bit to expose all your taste buds to all the different flavors in the wine. Other components: fruit flavors, earth, tannins, acidity, all of these things you learn to understand and you learn to detect in wine. I just have one, if you want to learn about wine, I have one basic bit of advice for you. Drink a lot of wine. Can I get an amen? Thank you. That's really, seriously, it's the only way to learn about it. So, the finish. The longer the flavors stay in your mouth, the better the wine is likely to be. We talk about wines having a long finish. Now, if you are at a wine tasting, like maybe tonight, where you're going to taste 35, 40 different kinds of wines, you really don't want to swallow them all. You go home in an ambulance, okay? And when we go to grand tastings, we go to trade tastings, and there's dozens of tables and dozens of wine. Believe me, when you do this professionally, you don't swallow it all. But I have one thing to tell you. They have spit buckets on the table. When you spit, it is not polite to go for distance, okay? You want to go right in the bucket. So there's all different kinds of flaws that wine can have. Sulfur, sometimes you taste burnt matches, you taste oxidation. Brettanomyces or Brett gives it a kind of a barnyard flavor. And these are all things that we have to watch out for when we're learning to appreciate wine and tasting professionally. So that's basically an overview. One more thing to talk to you about today, and that's corks versus screw caps. And the reason I put this part in, and the reason PJ asked me to cover this with you today, is because how many of you have had, you've been trying to sign people up, and they say, oh, well, this wine comes with a screw cap. It can't possibly be any good. You see hands? Do you get this question? Yeah, I think a lot of people associate poor quality wine with screw caps, and there was a time when that was true. I'll show you in the presentation in just a minute. Way back in the day, before American wine got to be really good and important and significant and world-class quality, you had people like Carlo Rossi, who still makes wine. You had Ernest and Giulio Gallo, and they would put wines in these great big jugs with a screw cap on top, and they'd call them Pink Chablis, Hardy Burgundy, things like that. You can't do that anymore because you can't call it Burgundy unless it comes from the Burgundy region in France. You can't call it Chablis unless the grape is actually Chablis. So they would use these old world trade names, and they put anything they wanted in the bottle. They get 20 tons an acre off their vineyards, and they'd throw all the grapes into the crusher along with weeds and field mice and grasshoppers and anything else that they could put in there. And they would make this terrible, terrible stuff. So the screw cap, even still today, has a kind of an image of poor quality. So back in the old days, we would use amphoras. We use terracotta clay pots to store wine in, and we'd, back 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and we'd stuff rags in the top and maybe put some beeswax over it to keep the wine from falling out. But now, of course, we use corks. We use corks because, number one, they're renewable. Corks are nothing more than a bark of a certain kind of oak tree. So we can always grow more. They're organic, they're natural, and they are slightly permeable. So little bitty bits of air get in and out of the bottle, and little bitty bits of air can help the wine age a little bit. Now, there are people who are making very, very high quality wines now who are putting them in screw tops and putting them away for 10 years to find out whether the wines that are bottled under cork and the wines that are bottled under screw cap develop the same way in the bottle. They may or they may not. We don't know yet. But people are putting very, very high quality wines into screw tops just to see what will happen. Here's a cork tree. As it happens, somehow or other, the Portuguese got really lucky and they got 50% of the cork trees in the world. And every 9 years, you go in there and you strip the bark off the trees. You take these flat panels of bark, you put them in all kinds of baths to sanitize them and clean them, and then you punch out corks, you punch out engine gaskets, you punch out bulletin boards and trivets, and things like that. But that's the way it's done. So we don't want to use cork because it's degradable. There are a lot of times, and if you had the experience that I've had, you got your corkscrew, you put it in there, you pull the cork out, and half of it stays in the bottle. What a pain in the butt, So they don't necessarily always hold together. Some of these older wines, if you're a collector of very famous, like First Growth Bordeaux's, and you've got wines that are 50 or 60 years old, you can take them back to the winery, or the winery sometimes will hold recorking clinics, where they'll take out the old cork and give you a new one because they break down, they degrade, and sometimes they leak. And then we need special equipment to open them. There's some examples of some old corkscrews and some of the kinds we use today. So you need a tool to open them with, and sometimes that can be a little bit of a pain as well. Come on. Okay. Why do we not use cork? Well, here's a thing called a Coravin. I was talking to somebody about this last night. This is a device that was invented by a surgeon, and it basically consists of a long, thin needle that's attached to a CO2 cartridge. So you put the needle through the cork, you push a little button, it pressurizes the bottle, and then you can pour out an ounce or two at a time. They're not cheap. They're about $300, so ask for one for Christmas, okay? But it allows you to taste the wine without compromising the cork, without having to take the cork out of the bottle, and you can put that bottle right back into the rack, and it will not leak because the hole is very, very tiny. So this is a handy device. The one reason that we don't use cork is because of a thing called cork taint. It is a fungus called TCA, and it's virtually indestructible and immortal. It lives in the wooden pallets in wine cellars. It lives in various kinds of materials, and it makes wine taste corked. Sometimes it'll just kill the fruit flavors, or it will give the wine a flavor of wet cardboard or something like that. And there's really nothing we can do about it. 5 to 7% of all wines that are bottled under cork go bad. Think about if you had a factory and 5 to 7% of everything you made was bad, how long would you stay in business? But so winemakers are getting tired of this, and they're starting to go more towards screw caps more and more. So the only thing you can do if you get a corked bottle of wine is pour it down the sink. There's no remedy for it. Screw caps, they seal bottles tightly, they seal them forever, and everybody in the world has a bottle opener right here. So if you got a screw cap, all you need is a thumb, and a forefinger, and an opposing thumb, and you can open it up. You never find yourself stuck with a bottle of wine and no way to open it up. So again, I talk about Carlo Rossi, I talk about Ernest and Giulio Gallo, who gave screw caps kind of a bad name because the wines that they poured under their names were really not very good. But today, the situation is different. I've got a friend named Sparky Marcus. Sparky Marcus makes a wine in Australia called Mollydrucker. And I don't know if any of you get Wine Spectator magazine, but every year Wine Spectator does a top 100 list of the 100 best wines in the world. his wine, Carnival of Love. Last year, he's up on stage at the Wine Experience. I think I took that picture. And he's celebrating the fact that his Carnival of Love wine was the #2 wine in the world. $75 a bottle. Guess what? Screw cap. Okay? So don't let anybody tell you that screw caps are an indication of wine that is not high quality. There are a lot of really tremendous wines that are being made today that are under screw caps. If you have any questions about it, please email me, winewhisperer@directsellers.com. I can answer your questions for you. I can point you in the right direction to get more information. And good luck to everybody in building your business. And God bless you all, and thank you for being here.
Red, red wine.